welcome back, guys. How are you guys? Hey, Nix, thank you for the 3 months resub. That's awesome. Hi and welcome to the Game Design Book Club. I am Björn, and we're going through The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. But there you go. As you can see right now, Tasty is not with us this week. He is sadly sick, but we will still... But he didn't show up, what? Oh, Meowski, yours didn't show up. No, I don't know what happened. Hey, thank you for the resub too, Meowski. You're awesome. You all guys are awesome. Every sub helps towards creating this type of content, creating more market analysis, feedback to your guys' games, and doing more reviews of all kinds of books. Are you on Twitch Beta? Oh yeah, Twitch Beta doesn't work. It's like totally bugged. Welcome everybody. Welcome Nafe, Daddy Dragon, Lost Thing. So like I said, Tasty won't join us today, but hopefully he can join us next week. So we'll still go through the next 2 chapters of the book. There we go. Now it worked. Thank you, Meowski. 4x sub. I didn't know I've been affiliate for months already. Thank you guys for the support. So, right now, this is the next chapter. Let me actually adjust one thing in the camera because otherwise it'll keep adjusting the focus. Just a second. You see, instantly, whoa. Oh no. Okay, now it's back. You can see instantly that Tasty is not here. The production quality goes down to 0. So, yeah, if you have problems with subs with any channel, it's probably because you're in the beta that they're trying to make everybody part of. Hope they fix those issues very soon because there are some really nice improvements in the beta. So now, the next chapter. So we've covered now, what? The 7 first chapters. We've gone through stuff like why is it important to think about the player's experience? What is the experience? How to choose a great theme or why it is important? All kinds of different subjects. And now we come to a very important chapter. The chapter goes through, the game improves through iteration. Sorry, it gets really dark because the book is so white. So the game improves through iteration. And this is something that everybody should use. It doesn't matter if you're a small indie developer or if you're a bigger company. And this chapter gets very theoretical. It gets to where it's like you have graphs like these and it's explaining like the in-depths of agile development. Here you can see a bit. You don't need to read that. It's still like, you can just see kind of the general idea. So, and by the way, guys, if you have the book, you can join in chat, and we can also discuss that way. As now Tasty's not here, so any comments, any feedback is welcome. So the chapter starts off talking about how to choose an idea, and because in the last chapter we discussed there was like I think 15 different methods of idea generation. Now, generating idea is if you don't struggle generating ideas, you usually struggle on choosing one of the ideas. And in the first section of the 8th chapter, he discusses how to choose your idea and how to evaluate that. And it's actually very interesting, and we'll go in depth in a moment. So basically, it's kind of like, he discussed like, every developer has this, is this the right idea? Is this the one I want to make? How do I evaluate that? How do I know if it's good? And it's quite fast goes into iterative looping through our ideas. Because once you had your idea and you've chosen, you have to iterate. And your idea will change throughout that iteration because instantly your idea faces the actual target audience or the players you want to play your game. It's going to start changing because how you initially thought it would work, it usually doesn't work that same way. So let's go through. He introduces And the first thing is the 8 filters. So these are 8 filters you can choose or use to kind of evaluate an idea, if it's good or not. I came a bit late to this new series. Hey Dead Dragon, if you guys are just joining in, don't worry. Most of these lenses are posted in our Discord, so you can check them out there. You can read up there. You can also buy the book. The link is below. If you don't have the book, don't worry. I will try to cover the finer points. This chapter is going to be tough because this chapter is very theoretical. It's probably the most theoretical chapters thus far. 9-time story. Good day. So the rabbit went down. No. So the 8 filters. So the 8 filters are kind of like, they're not like the lenses. These are still kind of questions, but it's kind of like how to evaluate or how to choose what ideas to go forward with and which ideas to kind of rework. Not necessarily decide not to do, but rework. So the first filter you need to evaluate through is the artistic impulse. And he says, this is the most personal of filters. You as the designer basically ask yourself whether the game feels right to you. And if it does, it passes the test. If it doesn't, something needs to change. Your gut feelings and the gut feelings of your team are important. They won't always be right, but the other filters will balance that out. So key question, does this game feel right? Does this idea feel right? This is very abstract, and if you would start off, in my personal experience, if you start off asking this question as the first one, it's something you anyway do, but without kind of the other questions like the next one, it's going to be kind of pointless because you're just think, would I play it? Which is not, the meat of a game. It's awesome if you love the game you're going to design, and it's kind of a prerequisite that you love it and are passionate about it, but it's not the only measurement. So that goes straight to filter 2, demographics. So your game is likely to have an intended audience. This might be an age bracket or a gender or some other distinct audience, example, golf enthusiasts. You have to consider whether your design is right for the demographic you're targeting. Demographics will be discussed in more detail in Chapter 9, Player. Hola! What's up, Mr. Nicoli? So the question you need to ask in Filter 2 is, will the intended audience like the game enough? So I think for me actually, it's quite a lot thinking of these questions, like the question number 1, which was, does this game feel right? At the same time as I think about, will the intended audience like this game enough? Because they are so highly interlinked. There's a lot of things I think would be really interesting to make, but if the targeted audience doesn't like it, then you have a disconnect. As an indie developer, I mean, how does this then phase in? Usually, if you're an indie developer, I find that too few think about the demographics. So demographic is thinking about the age group, who is it for, and stuff like that. Whereas in bigger companies and commercial companies, they think a lot about this, and it's almost every project has an intended audience. He uses here in the book an example of Disney, right? So he's worked for Disney. He's made a lot of Disney rides or not a lot. He made the VR Disney ride for Disney World, I think it was. And if you make something for Disney, it's kind of, that, families and small children will play it. That's already your target demographic. It needs to work in a family setting with a mom and a dad and children. But as an indie dev, because you are basically the business leader, you might think about where, you're going to launch your game. I'm going to launch my game on Steam. That's where I know and I feel comfortable launching. Or I want to make indie experience be like the other indie developers. That might be your aspiration. Now, that's all cool. Don't get me wrong. But the big thing is to think about the demographics. So what is it? Actually, if you haven't checked out Ryan _Clark on Twitch, he does bi-weekly, so every other week, not twice a week, but every other week, he has a show where he does market research. And just this Friday, he had a good point where sometimes a good way, for example, to define a demographic is to look at underserved markets. So looking at he analyzed Cuphead and looked deeply into that. I didn't follow all through of that, but he basically, for example, one of his theories was that, actually not for Cuphead, for Tooth and Tail, was that it got such popularity even as an RTS, because RTS are not really MOBAs kind of are replacing RTS somewhat. Like the big part of people who played RTS have moved over to MOBAs, and there's still like a core audience for RTS, but those are underserved. So again, that's a way to fill demographics, or to make one for yourself, is to not only come up with an idea that you think you can execute around and be passionate about, but when defining demographics, look at what, if just Cuphead has come out, maybe it's not smart to create another Cuphead. It's gonna have filled kind of a void that people wanted, and then you're just gonna get compared to that, and you might not have anything new, cool, and something like that in your game. So when thinking about your demographic, which was filter number 2, do define one. It's so important, but it's so hard, I understand. But this is a method for indies, is to think about what are in my game, could it serve some kind of underserved demographic, and you don't have to go to extreme. Again, underserved doesn't mean that they don't exist. It needs to still be a market. As an indie, you can't create markets, don't get me wrong, a lot of indies do, but you definitely shouldn't what would be a good example? Like making something that maybe 5 people in the world or 100 people in the world will like. It's just not enough if you want to make any money. So Cuphead Expert All Bosses Speedrun just got a new world record about 10 minutes ago. 35 minutes. Oh, that's fast. Yeah, I think Cuphead is excellent for speedruns. It's inherently built for that. I haven't yet played it, but this is at least the insight I've seen from just looking at gameplay. Hello, Mad Max. Welcome. So the 8 filters we're going through the 8 filters how to evaluate your idea. So the first one was artistic impulse. Does this game feel right? The second was demographic. Will the intended audience like this game enough? Now the third filter is experience design. To apply this filter, take into account everything you know about creating a good experience, including aesthetics, interest curves, resonant theme, and game balancing. Many of these lenses in this book are about experience design. To pass this filter, your game must stand up to the scrutiny of many lenses. Is this a well-designed game? And that's the question. Is this a well-designed game? So again, once you looked at, okay, artistically, I feel like there's something there. And I think that the people who plays this type of games will like it. So the demographics question. Then the next one is this well designed for that? And taking into account what kind of theme did I choose? What kind of experience am I wanting to create? And are people having those experiences? And by the way, this is not something you would do necessarily just instantly you have an idea. This is something you would evaluate every time you iterate on a game. So this is something every time you test your game with an audience, you would go through these filters. So next one is, which I think is probably the hardest one, and I am actually quite hard when I get feedback to people if this is lacking. And it's actually so hard to have it that it's kind of rare. But the fourth filter is the filter innovation. If you're designing a new game, by definition, there needs to be something new about it. Something players haven't seen before. Whether your game is novel enough is a subjective question, but a very important one. Is this game novel enough? I think I discussed this even on last Tuesdays, giving feedback to a couple of games. The thing is, it takes experience to know what he means here and what, when I talk about innovation, what we mean. It doesn't mean that you should recreate everything. It just means that it needs to create a new experience. It's a bit like if you make, an Avengers movie, and then the second Avengers movie comes out and it's just the same story, the same arc, people will be disappointed. But if it has something new and novel, a new storyline, something you didn't know about the hero, or something that introduces in that movie, people are going to be interested. And same thing goes to games. That's a bit bad example because they're the same makers. Like, that's always challenging in movies and in games to make the second game of a series. But this, even in the first game, like, for example, why did Cuphead? Why was it so popular? It brought a lot of new things. It brought a style, an aesthetic you haven't seen. The gameplay was heavily focused on kind of local multiplayer, but in a nice, interesting way. It provided a challenge for people who loved that type of challenge. And actually, because of the aesthetics, it was so, like, it's kind of something everybody has seen, especially for older generation, have seen in their childhood, like Mickey Mouse and those kind of stuff, and Disney. So I think the thing is, like, even if you don't like games, you're going to be interested in what that is because it looks like a cartoon and looks like a very well-made cartoon. So I think the innovation in that game lies there. But sometimes you might have something else, like in, what could be another example? Do you guys have any? Like, something when you played it, you were like, well, a failure at that, I guess, is it had the innovation part, but it didn't have the experience design, I think. So the filter number 3 was No Man's Sky, was that it had the innovation. It was like, oh, you can explore in a world. It was basically a bit over-promising, which, like, already when I saw the first trailer, I knew that that's going to be hard because you're promising so much already, and they didn't show any gameplay. I always get worried. Guys, if you see a trailer and they don't show any gameplay, they just show off tech or just story, get a bit worried. Get like this much worried. Especially if it's an indie. Like, if it's a big studio, they can just be like, oh, look, here's the new Batman game trailer, and it's just story. That's fine. But when it's a bit smaller studio, if they don't show any gameplay mechanics, even if they have in-game cutscenes, it's a bit like, I don't know what this game is about, then I'm personally at least worried. It's kind of one of those triggers. But yeah, figuring out what innovation, what is this game novel enough? And it's such a hard thing. But it's so important to have an answer that satisfies. And it shouldn't be, I have great gameplay, I have great music, I have great visuals, I have those. Like, it can be, like, great is fine, but what is novel about it? Why hasn't it been seen before? And why is it so important that people will buy it just because of this? Like, a lot of the time, the innovation is the thing that people buy. They buy kind of the comfort of a thing, but they also want people to have a new experience. They don't want to have a bad experience they had before or the same experience. They can just go play that game then. There are exceptions to where if you make a remake of an old game, that might still have quite good success, and usually does, if you do it well. But the expectations then are so high. So I'm always careful remaking something old, especially if it's one-to-one. Like, you see remakes like Sonic and all these kind of things fail because it's your standard, your memories of the game are so high up there. But it's still possible. So the fifth filter. So we have first filter, artistic impulse. Then we have filter 2, demographics. Filter 3, experience design. Filter 4, innovation. And now the fifth filter is business and marketing. The game's business is a business. And designers who want their games to sell must consider the realities of this and integrate them into their game's design. This involves many questions. Are the theme and story going to be appealing to consumers? Is the game so easily explainable that one can understand it with just what it is about just by looking at the overview? What are the expectations consumers are going to have about this game based on the genre? How do the features of this game compare to other similar games in the marketplace? Will the cost of producing this game be so high as to make it unprofitable? Does the business model for the game make sense? The answer to these and many others questions are going to have an impact on your design. Ironically, The innovative idea that drove the initial design might prove to be completely unattainable when viewed through this filter. This will be discussed in chapter 31, Profit. Well, we're not at discuss 31 yet. Yeah, it needs its own niche. And it's not about a niche, because a lot of time, how I see a niche is that it's a demographic, right? But it's not necessarily a niche. It's kind of like the bringing something new to something old. So, if you're going to make StarCraft and you're not Blizzard, then you need something new. So, for example, Tooth and Tail, they tried to make a strategy game you could play with a controller, so it was simplified, as an example. So that was the new thing they brought. There's other people attempted on that. That's fine, but that's what their thing was. Like, we want to kind of, for people who just like RTS, but you could say MOBAs did the same thing, but they did it in a different direction than MOBAs did. MOBAs did remove all the units. Hey Lime Lemon, welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow, dude. For a new developer, how do I evaluate the cost? That is a great question. I mean, well, as a new developer, most probably it's your direct costs that are going to be the biggest in the beginning. And then as you go on, the thing is, when you're new, you probably don't have any money, so any costs are. So you need to actually think, how can I make it on zero or no budget? But yeah, definitely, it's a hard question. And that's why I think when you're starting off as a a new developer, not your first commercial game, which you're intending to make money, but if you're learning just to craft still, I would just try to get my name out there by going and put it on Newgrounds, publishing your game on itch and stuff like that. All this talk about consumer works only under the assumption that you're making a game for profit consumers. Approaching game as art knows all of this. Of course, but definitely there's cases where, but then the business and marketing, like if you're making art, you still at least need the marketing part. And there's still costs. So you need to then think, okay, I'm making games for art. I'm just making it for self-satisfaction. It's for art. It's for, I want, whatever you wanted from it. And then you need to think, am I going to fund it myself? So am I going to work on my, on the side and finance it through that? Or am I going to finance it through, for example, some kind of grant? And there's still then you need to think about like, okay, what's the reception? Then you can give it out free. Marketing, again, I would say factors in the way that most probably if you're making a game, you want people to play it. Without any marketing, you're not gonna, nobody's gonna know about it. You need to kind of reach a certain threshold. This doesn't mean you have to go and become a marketing expert or put a lot of money into it, but it's something to think about. Your main cost is time, as a new developer. That's a good way to put it. So I would say even art has a cost. Everything you make has a cost. The thing is, people don't think that their own time is valuable and that has also a cost. I think that's a huge misconception and something that burns people out. They don't think of their own time as valuable and as part of the cost. There is no game that can be made with 0 hours. You will have to at least draw 1 pixel and write 1 line of code and make, it's not 0. And that means that there's a cost, even if it's a cost on your, it might be a health cost even. A lot of developers don't think about that. So even if you're not thinking it from that perspective, you should still measure how long will this take? How many hours am I willing to put this? This is actually one of the filters I use when I work on art. So in the business of marketing is, how many years am I willing to work on this? Let's say that I would know that it's a hit. I don't. I never know. Nobody knows. But let's say I do. Then always the question is, how many years do I want to put on this? Or how many months? Usually you measure in years. And especially if you're experienced, games take years, not months. Except if it's just a small prototype game. That's totally different. But I mean like a fully commercial game. Not commercial meaning like a full-fledged game with enough like content for people to rave about. So And that's actually something I find not enough people are asking themselves when starting to make a game, is like, how many years am I actually willing to put in this? Because I've seen very passionate people, very artistic people, and what they do is they will just go on without thinking, which is great. I mean, that drives them. That's the awesome thing, right? That's the juice. But the thing is, at some point, when you don't think at all about how to actually finish the game, you will actually run into where you don't finish the game. You will be working on the game for like 50 years. No, not 50, but 7 years, 10 years, and you just go on and on. Then you get hit depression, you lose hope, and all these kind of things because you just keep on going and going. Because if you don't plan it out at all, you're just gonna burn yourself out, and it's just gonna go on for eternity. You need to put down some kind of like your foot where it's like, this experience, even if it's an art piece, needs to be done by November, So usually there's natural barriers, but not always. And that's another thing when you're evaluating idea, which is not in this book, is how many years are you actually, as a person, if you're indie, how many years are you willing to put into this? Is this idea great enough that you will spend the next 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year? And you could actually use that also then to scope it down. So if you're like, I would like to get this finished in 1 year so the next year I could work on something else, then then you need to scope it down to a 1 year project. And of course, as a new developer, which we just discussed, it's hard to know how long things take. I like to take every estimation times 3. So if you're new, you think you're going to make it in 3 months, then take it times 3, it's almost 9 months, which is basically a year. So basically, if you think it's 3-4 months, then it's going to be a year's project. And this is even, experienced people even, you always run into stuff you don't expect. And actually he talks about this in just a moment in this book. So the 6th filter he proposes is the filter of engineering. I'm not going to read it, it's quite long. But basically, is it technically possible to build this game? And actually, it's a good point he has here, is that a lot of the time, when it's not technically possible, it doesn't mean that you should stop there. Sup, Wymela? Welcome. Welcome to the book club. We're looking at the art of game design. And we're going through 8 filters to kind of look through your idea if it's viable to do. Or viable / is it a good thing to go forward? So the engineering part, I think he has a good point here, which is that the ideas that appear during this filter can sometimes be very valuable, because sometimes when you run into technical limitations, you might be like, we can't really do it this way. This is what we wanted to do. Oh, thank you for the bits, Tasty Graph. So this is the real thing we really want to do. I'm going to read your text in just a moment. But we can't. So let's do it. What if we did it this way? And actually, when you actually pivot and you have to kind of, work around an idea. Like you're like, this is just not possible with the current tech or something, whatever. I don't know what it is. This is just an example. So then when you work around, I had the same thing with myself. It's like you actually simplify your idea and it becomes something awesome because you actually ran into this technical problem. So actually this spawns a lot of good ideas. Shows up from the shadows and pays a sick fee for not being here. As per paragraph 48, section 12, the book club co-host rule set. What? I haven't signed that. Welcome, Tasty Graph. Now you will see how much we need you here. We need the balance of both Bjorn and Tasty. So yeah, Tasty is sadly sick, but hopefully you will be okay next week and you will join us, because it's always awesome to do this together. We get more discussion, less me just talking. But maybe this is more like, maybe I should do it in an ASMR way and just whisper this so you can continue working. But this is stuff you can listen to, continue working. And also remember, guys, I try to read everything you post here, so you just keep posting questions or things, This is not, he even says here, this is not like an absolute rule set. He doesn't know everything. I don't know everything. So, and the way to kind of, not to question everything, that's not good, but to question things and have discussions a very important part of learning and understanding something. But if you were in an endless loop where you work to make money for the game but don't have time for the game because you know you have a job, yeah, I mean, the thing is, that's when you just have to make a decision. If you never have time to make your game, you have to make the decision that, are you going to continue? And I mean, it's about your own priorities then in life, and it becomes very philosophical. People tend to do the things that are higher priority, and then you need to think about what makes you actually happy. And I mean, not everybody has the opportunity to work full time on a game, and there are no shortcuts. Probably the easiest way and the best way is to actually go into the game industry, because even if you're not working on your game, you're working on other games, which means that you're gaining experience you can use in your own game, which means that, again, your development will go faster because you know more. I'll be okay next week for sure. I'm just completely meh today and have been sleeping almost all day. Going back to bed again, just want to say hello. Hey, thanks for joining us, dude. For just a moment. Watch the VOD? Turn off the lights. No, it's okay. Yeah, you can watch the VOD and be like, no, I disagree with everything Darren says. So that was the filter of engineering to see if it's technically possible to do. Next is the social/community filter. Sometimes it's not enough for a game to be fun. Some of the design goals may require a strong social component, a strong viral component, or the formation of a thriving community around your game. The design of your game will have a strong impact on these. This will be discussed in D10 chapter 23 and 24, which is in Eternity. So does this game meet our social and community goals? And I think this is highly important for actually both indie and art games, which we discussed a bit, but especially indie games, because especially if you want to make a bit of profit. So profit doesn't mean you're evil. I think too many people think like, oh, if you want profit, you're evil. You are greedy. That's not the same thing. Why you want profit for the first is so you can make your next game, so you can keep on doing this. And supporting and buying games enables that developer to make more of those type of games for you. So, there might be evil EA, that's a different thing, whatever, we don't want to discuss that. But from indie point of view, it's, we need profit to be able to continue developing our games. And every cent that comes in means that we can make it even better, or outsource to some talent, or get more talent in to work on it so it becomes even more amazing. And when we don't have that money, usually you're limited and you have to struggle. So that's supporting. So that comes to the community in the way that an indie needs definitely community, because there's no way you're gonna pass the fifth filter of business and marketing if you don't have one. Because alone, we're just one voice among millions. But even with 1,000 followers, a small community, you already have more voice, and you have more people to bounce things off of, and more people to support your game. And if you're struggling to build a community, it definitely takes time. That's the biggest thing with indie, is that it takes so much time. It's all away from your development, usually. The thing that it brings to development, which you shouldn't underestimate, is the feedback. So your community is the people who feedback. If you can create a community, it also means that there is a market for your game. If you don't have any community, you might want to question that, is this a game that anybody's interested in? Again, you also should factor in your skills in building communities. I mean, sometimes it's a great idea, but building communities is not easy. So again, does this game meet our social and community goals? So just have community goals. Like, I want to have a small community on Steam, or I want to have small Discord. Maybe I can get 100 people interested. I'll go talk to different streams and showcase my case, and ask them to join my Discord if they're interested in the game, and then we'll have discussions around it. That's probably a very viable thing. Let's Play streamers, I would be a bit careful. Definitely don't post links. Maybe you can ask people to, DM you on Twitch instead. And you can join my Discord, and there's fine to post your community Discords and link to stuff under stuff you work on. Then again, my community is mostly game developers, but that might be your target audience. So remember, again, demographic, the second filter. So all these filters are kind of things you have to all have in your head at the same time. That's the struggle, at least for me sometimes. Like, I need to do this, but then this, and then this, and I need to think about this. So if I'm building the community, I need to think about the demographic. I need to think about the social community goals. I need to think about all these things. And that's where, especially when you're working something alone, it's always good to have at least one person to bounce your ideas off of. So the eighth filter, and the last one, and probably the most important one, is playtesting. Once the game has been developed to the point that it is playable, you must apply the playtesting filter, which is arguably the most important of all filters. It is one thing to imagine what playing a game will be like, and quite another to actually play it. And yet another to see it played by your target audience. This, I think, a lot of people don't understand this. I think if you understand, it shows maturity and experience in being a game developer, that you know that once you had an idea, it always seems amazing. There's almost no idea that didn't seem amazing, which if you liked it, I mean, in your head when you came up with it or you're building it, but instantly you see someone actually experiencing that idea. Or if you actually, first step to evaluate is you building it, then you know if you can get it to work as intended. And then when someone plays, and that's the thing, that's the final verdict. It doesn't matter in the end what you think, it's who the intended audience thinks. There's a pretty interesting article that bounced around Twitter a few weeks ago. It's called "What is Marketing First Game Development?" It's a pretty interesting perspective on what marketing is and how it relates to game dev. Oh, nice. If you have that article, you can post it in the chat. Also, you can post it in our Discord Sunspot. That would be really cool to read. I haven't read that. So the filter goes on still. You will want to get your game to a playable stage as soon as possible, because when you actually see your game in action, important changes that must be made will become obvious. In addition to modifying the game itself, the application of this filter often changes and tunes other filters as you start to learn more about your game mechanics and the psychology of your intended audience. Playtesting will be discussed in detail in chapter 27. Do the playtesters enjoy game enough is the eighth filter. So a lot of these things he will return in the next chapters and even in this chapter as we go forward. But I wanted to cover these filters very accurately because I think they're very valuable. And we'll skip a bit more in the next coming chapters. So this 8 filters, that is the next lens. So the lens of 8 filters. To use this lens, you must consider the many constraints your design must satisfy. You can only call your design finished when it can pass through all 8 filters without requiring a change. And probably you could, this doesn't say, but you could probably, if you're making an art game or a bit special, like it actually says here a bit about it, you can add that as a filter or change a filter to meet your requirements. Ask yourself the 8 key questions. Does this game feel right? Will the intended audience like the game enough? Is this well-designed game? Is this game novel enough? Will this game sell? Is it technically possible to build this game? Does this game meet our social and community goals? Do the playtesters enjoy this game enough? In some situations, there will be still more filters. For example, an educational game will also have to answer questions like, does this game teach what it's supposed to? If your design requires more filters, don't then neglect them. Exactly. So if you're making an art game, you probably have an artistic goal. I usually do playtest. I do 3 strikes and you're out. By this mean I show my game to a friend, and if I need to explain 3 different game concepts, it means I design it bad and back to the drawing board. Yeah. He actually goes through some... oh, thanks, Sunspot. I'll actually open that so I don't lose it somewhere. I'll anyway lose it because I'm a goof, but this is less likely. Actually, I can... let me... But yeah, and actually that comes to the next part when she starts the discussion on how to... it's basically project management, and that's why I won't go too deep into it. So the rule of the loop. So basically the rule of the loop the next part of the chapter discusses how to do iterative design, and he argues that the rule of the loop is unquestionable. You have to loop through your game. And that loop means that you need to play test, you need to give it to people, and if you don't do it, you are undeniably gonna fail. Like here it says a good thing, like the naive strategy, which many still use today, is to start slapping the game together and hope for the best. Sometimes this works, but when it doesn't, you're in a horrible mess. You either have to ship a game that you know isn't good enough, or suffer the expense of continuing development until it is. And often this extra time and expense is enough to make the project completely unprofitable. So here's the real problem here is the rule of the loop. The rule of the loop, the more times you test and improve your design, the better your game will be. So again, this is not a lens, he says here. So loop question 1, how can I make every loop count? How can I loop as fast as possible? So then he goes on discussing the waterfall method, you can show, of project management, which was the old thing where you didn't loop at all, you just did a crazy amount of planning and documentation. Then he discusses Barry Boehm, who started kind of in the 86 to think about iterative development. There's a couple of things that are good to look forward. Loop question 1, how can I make every loop count? So assess your risk and mitigate them. So every time, which we came in here with Daddy Dragon, is that you need to specify a very concrete goal for every playtest session. What are you testing? There's no point in testing just randomly. That's why, for example, again, when you can submit your game to us on Tuesdays, I ask you, do you have any special requests? Do you have any? Because I do know some people just send it for marketing. Some people actually need feedback. And the people who put special requests, I think, are more likely, again, to get good feedback that are relevant to them. Because not only will I focus on that, but also they know what they're looking for, which means they're going to be much more perceptive of those things. And you also kind of you will get more results, and you will be more likely to find actual issues in your game if you set goals. And here he calls them basically risks. So risks, what is the game fun? It's a risk people won't enjoy this mechanic. Well, in the next playtest, we will just test this mechanic. We will not test anything else. The game might not even have a go, but we will just want, is this a fun, playful mechanic? And then also, that helps you with the next thing, which is how can I loop as fast as possible? So build many rough prototypes is this answer, right? So again, you could make just a separate game, a separate experience with just the main mechanic. If your thing is like, I don't know if that's going to be fun, you just make one thing and you just play that and see if people enjoy just that basic interaction. So you can make many games, which you could actually, if you worried about the story, you could tell the story in comic book format, and you could actually iterate it through comic books. If your game is very, very comic book heavy. Sup, Devious Oatmeal, welcome, welcome. So again, it goes it goes into even expense. So next is the Agile Manifesto, which was born 2001 by a group of people. And agile development is stuff like you have sprints, you have scrum meetings, you have demo day, you have retrospectives, you have all these kind of, and these are kind of set concepts. I would say, and how to use a prioritized backlog and stuff like that. So again, I'm not going to cover this because I think you guys are more indie developers just like me. And if you're not, you're most probably, you would have to read this, or if you work in a, experienced team, you will learn this. It's not something you need to worry about if you're professional. And if you're indie, Scrum meetings alone are not that useful. But then again, if you have a team of 3, Scrum meetings can be very, very, very good. So let me go through it really fast. So sprints is you basically assign a goal for the next 2 weeks. So you have always a 2 week. At the end of that 2 week, you will always have a demo day where you will show the result and you will do a play test. And everything needs to be done before that end of the 2 weeks. So you set goals. Scrum meetings are daily meetings. You have them usually in the morning where you go through what did you do yesterday, what are you going to do today, And what are you? And is there anything that's blocking you from achieving the goals? And the idea is that you every day kind of discuss with the whole team that are we on track to for whatever goes 2 weeks from now. And the 2 week goal kind of forces you to have a goal and have set goals that you need to achieve. There's so much more different things here. Again, if you have a small indie company, there definitely something. Go look and read up on Agile Manifesto if you're not doing that already. I think most companies already are. Even here, he claims that 80% of game companies already use this method. And I tend to agree, at least the companies I've seen. Indie developers will less likely, especially if you're working alone. There's not much. Well, you could have a Scrum by yourself, and I actually think that is a great idea, by the way. But most people won't do it because instantly you don't have anybody to bounce the idea off or discuss with. It kind of becomes moot. Loop Veni Mox? Is that a Melks? I don't know. Is that French? I do not know how to pronounce that. But welcome anyway to the company Game Devs and cheers for the follow. We're going through the art of game design. So this, like I said, this chapter is so theory heavy. And then he has like several examples or like Risk 1, like he discusses this game called The Prison of Bubble Will, design brief, and has a design brief. And then he has like Risk 1, the bubble collecting vulture shooting mechanic might not be as fun as we think. Risk 2, the game engine might not be able to handle drawing an entire city and all those bubbles and vultures at once. So these are examples of the risks. So these are things you should set into your, for example, like one sprint goal would be like the bubble collecting vulture mechanic might not be fun as we think. So during one sprint, they'll just make one small demo of that and just test that without anything else, nothing else. And you just test that. Once you know that that's good, and you can iterate, of course, you don't in one sprint get that correct. It's like Levo Nemo. Oh, Levo Nemo. Oh, like I said, I knew I butchered that name. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get it that right. Because I know that how you pronounce it, it's like all hidden, like you swallow half the sounds. So I just didn't know which ones. Huh? Bonjour? Are you from, what country are you from? Anyway, so again, sorry if it might not even be France, but anyway. Sorry for my ignorance. So again, risk, then it goes into very deep into risks, and we won't cover them here because they're kind of boring. If I start reading these, guys are gonna fall asleep. But it's super important. So if you have the book, do check out this chapter. There's better and more in-depth literature on Agile. So if you're interested, there's actually even you can get a license or like a basically you can become a licensed Scrum Master and stuff like that. So there's things like that you can go and take if you're very interested in it. I would say for an indie developer, it's not much use for you to take an official degree, but if you want to be a project manager, it's definitely something you need to look into. So this brings us to the lens of risk mitigation, which is lens 16 of the art of game design. And it says, because the sage always confronts difficulties, he never experiences them. Tao Te Ching, so it's a Chinese guy. So that was a quote. Because the sage always confronts difficulties, he never experiences them. To use this lens, stop thinking positively and start seriously considering that things that could go horribly wrong with your game. Sorry, that was weirdly pronounced. Let me reread that. To use this lens, stop thinking positively and start seriously considering the things that could go horribly wrong with your game. Ask yourself these questions. What could keep this game from being great? How can we stop that from happening? Risk management is hard. It means you have to face up to the problems you would most like to avoid and solve them immediately. But if you discipline yourself to do it, you loop more times and more usefully. And this is a very difficult sentence. But if you discipline yourself to do it, you loop more times and more usefully, and get a better game as a result. Anyway, it's attempting to ignore potential problems and just work on the parts of the game you feel most confident about. You must resist this temptation and focus on the parts of the game that are in danger. So, again, so risks. I do definitely think that play to your strengths. That's another thing. And it is one way of risk mitigation is before you even start making a game, if you're working alone or in smaller teams, look at your team's strengths. Don't try to make stuff that are outside of your, strengths. Again, if I would have to make a game which has a lot of cinematics, a lot of story, I would probably fail because I'm not great at that. And in my team, there's nobody great at that. So then having that part is gonna drag. If that's a key concept in the game, it's gonna be horrible. So then I need to design and do decisions. Like any game still needs a theme and needs a story, but how can I make it so that I, with my skill set, can still make it interesting and good? Mitigation. Mitigation, sorry. Mitigation. I don't know how to say that. Mitigation. Mitigation. Yeah, mitigation. Sorry. Sorry. I probably said it wrong. Again, my native language is not English. So once you know more than 4 languages, you can come and talk to me in those languages. Anyway, so mitigation with M-I-T-I. Anyway, so again, and then he goes forward with 10 tips for productive prototyping. The first one, which we already covered, was answer a question. So every time you prototype, have a question that you try to answer in that test. So instead of just taking your game and throwing it at people and be like, oh, are they gonna like it? Which is, first off, a terrible feeling. And it kind of is counterproductive because you're not being, I don't want to use scientific, but it kind of is. You're leaving it up to, randomness if it's going to be a good test. And then trying to test the whole game is, not possible. Like most people, like some games you have to play 60 hours to get into. So, no, not 60, but 5 hours maybe even. Like Dark Souls, first hour you're just going to be creating your characters. If you want to test that game, for example, and you have the whole game there, people won't focus. They will be just like, this crap game, I didn't even get to play it. Multilingual person on stream. Yeah. Okay, I got it now. Thank you. Too much dance. The fickle gaming community may or may not like your game. Yeah. There's a lot of things, again. But these are good tips this book has to kind of reach that. And this type of scientific thinking, I could say, even if it's also artistic thinking, helps you to nail that thing in. Like, there's a reason certain companies almost always succeed, to create a very, very interesting game. And that's because they really think through these type of lenses and things. It's not random. And it's not because they just try harder. Try hard. So someone's going to post that in the chat. Anyway, so here are some examples of questions, like things you could think about. Like, how many animated characters can our technology support in the scene? Might be a prototyping test. Is our core gameplay fun? Does it fun for a long time? Is a thing you can test separately. Do our character and setting fit together well aesthetically? How large does the level of this game need to be? So these are all things you could test separately. And some even, like how many people you can have, the animated characters, can be tested without a player, even if you want. Again, and then the second tip is forget quality. So what he means with that is, when you do your tests, forget quality. You're not testing the overall quality or quality. And it's so easy to go into that thing where you're trying to make a perfect game. Like, you basically have the released game as your prototype. It's not good. You want to separately test them. So that means that you can just, if you can test it with the worst art, the worst code, but it still is a viable test for, like, example, is our core gameplay fun? Gameplay is not the aesthetics. Gameplay is, interaction and what's happening and the actions that are happening. So you can test that with the lowest quality, whatever you can get to where you still think that is important. It depends, again, about what type of game it is. It doesn't even need levels. Yeah, he even actually, I don't remember, was it here or earlier, is that Actually, it's later on. He says that the first 2 levels is all you need in the beginning to evaluate if the game is good. Once you get to like the 50% mark, like halfway through the game, and then it's basically already a finished game. You just then need to add the content, right? But yeah, forget quality. Again, this is talk about the loop. So instead of starting to code your final game from start, you can make small prototypes that have nothing to do with each other. You will shift delete all the art, all the code. I know it feels bad, guys, and I think this is really good, and it's something I haven't used, but I think in future games I will use, is forget quality. So basically, make these type of small prototypes that, the quality can be whatever. I'm just gonna build some certain aspects I am worried about my gameplay and have them test that. Also, because it looks like crap, people are gonna less likely take it too serious. Like, they will probably voice their opinion more. Whereas if it looks really good, like the music is amazing, the art is amazing, it's like cinematics, then they actually stop questioning things and they might not give you as valuable feedback. I mean, what he means is quality outside of the thing for the prototype. And again, the implementation of that mechanic can be almost crap. Like, it just needs to be good enough. Because this is again about prototype. He doesn't say forget about quality in your product. Once you start developing your product, I can read the whole thing, but it's quite long. So I tried to paraphrase. But the idea is that, so the faster you can do that, the better. Even if it just barely works and looks rough around the edges, around the edges. In fact, polishing your prototype may even make things worse. Playtesters and colleagues are more likely to point out problems with something that looks rough than something that looks polished. Since your goal is to find problems immediately so you can solve them early, a polished prototype can actually defeat your purpose by hiding real problems, thus lulling you into your false sense of security. So again, the idea is this is a prototype. This is not something that will even be part of your game. So basically, if you have your main game here, here's your source, you would open a new project in Unity or GameMaker or Unreal or your own custom engine, and you would make just that part, and you would just throw in whatever you have, whatever you can make, so you can make it in a weekend, and then you test it, you give it to me or somebody else, your friend, and then he plays it, and he's like, oh, this is interesting, and you're like, I really want to know X, Y, Z. Like, really like, don't tell them what you're looking for, but tell them, like, can you really focus on the toy? Like, I try to make this kind of toy kind of thing here. And then people are like, oh, this is interesting. And then you won't even judge it as a game necessarily. Like, a lot of the time, the toyness might be even more important. And we actually will come back to that in just 2 pages, to the toy aspect of games. Then prototype number 3, don't get attached. So, again, this is about, plan to throw one away, you will anyway. So again, it means that you shouldn't get attached to your ideas. You need to kill your darlings. You shouldn't get too attached to your ideas, to your prototype. It is super painful. But remember, a thing that I try to say to people, when they don't want to kill, like, it's not killing the whole game. It's just killing some part of the game that isn't working. When they actually are seeing the people playing it, and then a lot of people go into denial. They're like, no, they just don't understand my game. Whereas, you need to be able to just kill off things and move forward. The good thing is, even if a game is, like, a certain mechanic or a thing is bad for this game, doesn't mean it might not be useful for your next game. So don't feel like it was a bad idea in general. It just means that it doesn't fit this game again. So thinking about that kind of aspect, and that's the thing. He even discusses here earlier in the chapter that really, like, you need to, as a game developer, if you want to be, very, very, good at game design. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. Sometimes not. I like to also kind of rattle your cages a bit, but sometimes you need to be careful. So if you want to be a really good game designer, doing decisions really fast really fast just to try it, not sitting there like for eight years being like, this is not going to get you anywhere. And if you know you're at this stage with a game, put it in the backlog, work on some other game. Just put it there. You can have it simmer back in your head, work on some other game. But this is the worst. You need to make fast decisions. Like, I'm just going to try this one. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. I'll still have this. Like, I won't forget about this. I'll just put it here. It's right here. Right here. We'll try this. We try it. And then, again, going back. You tried this. Now you've tested with players. You get feedback. They all love it. Woohoo! You were amazing. You were the master of the universe. You did the right choice. Or you play them. They don't understand it. It's crap. I don't like it. It's, and then you, as a game designer, again, kill your darlings. Go back. Like, don't be, it's kind of the thing. You become a real designer once you are able to go back on your ideas. Going like, okay, that was the wrong direction. I need to go this way. I need to take, a couple of steps back. And that's fine. Once you can admit that you failed and, and again, it's not failure in general. It's probably still a good idea in other game, but for this game, it didn't work. For this target audience, it didn't work, or some other reason. It doesn't mean you're bad. It actually makes you better. It means you're good because you're able to, because otherwise you'll be stuck going in the wrong direction. It's a bit like making a game is like sailing. You're trying to get from wherever you are. Let's say we're all trying to get to Tokyo, except if you're already at Tokyo. But I don't think we have any viewers from Tokyo. I would love to have some, but I don't think so we have. So let's say we're all sailing to Tokyo, and let's say you take a wrong turn. And the longer it takes for you to admit you're taking a wrong turn, the longer your travel is going to be. You might even get lost fully and get stuck on a ridge. So correcting your course as fast as possible is super important. And as long as you can't do that, you can't be the captain, you can't be a designer, you can't be the, first mate or whatever. My ideas are always perfect. That is true. My ideas are, the thing is, it's not the fault of the idea again. It might be not the time for that idea. It's not like, and I think that's important to realize is like, it's not about is it bad or good or something like, it's just not right. It's not right for this game. And the faster you can write, like going left when you're going to Tokyo might find Hong Kong, and it might be great. Maybe someday you want to go to Hong Kong, you know where it is, to go left there, But for this game, for this thing, you wanted to go to Tokyo, so let's go to Tokyo, not Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is a great place too. I love it. How long have you been playing? You sound like a senpai. Oh, I've been like 12 years maybe. I'm 32. I look like 12, but I'm 32. So I'm already a senior developer. And also, a lot of this information, it's not just from me, it's from this book. So remember, this book has a lot of good advice. I'm trying to just, again, bring it to examples and, experience from my own life. Where were we? So that was tip 154. No, what? Where were we? Yeah, I'm turning 33 in just a couple of months. Risk mitigation. That was where we were. And don't get attached. It's hard. And it's hard to see when you're attached. It's so hard. It's always something I ask myself. I'm like, I thought you were 22. No. Look, I have gray hair even. Look, I'm an old man. Yeah, and that's my curse. Everybody thinks I'm 22. It's like, oh, what is this guy talking about? Anyway, prioritize your prototypes is the next tip. So again, when you make your list of risks, you might realize that you need several prototypes to mitigate all risk that you face. The right thing to do is to prioritize them like agile developers do. So again, prioritize things. Put the first things first and the last things last. And don't try to do all at the same time. The thing is, it's faster that way. You might think that, I'm gonna hit 2 birds with 1 stone, and you'll just end up hitting yourself and catching no birds. So prioritizing is very important in life, in everything. This is like a general rule for me in life. Prioritize, I hear so many people saying like, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, okay, so you didn't prioritize it. No, I really love to. And like, no, you're lying. If you would love to do something, you would be doing it. Do you write code so now you're in a loop looking? Yeah, I wish. Trust me, I will get old. I will be old. It'll just come. Like, that's the thing. I will never stop thinking like, oh, I always look young, because someday I will look old. Life is over. No, I'm just kidding. I just think that could make for a good pun. Not making fun. Mitigation. Yeah. I like that. It's where the meat lies when you mitigate things. It's always important to be able to have fun, and have fun with, and poke fun at yourself too. Parallelize prototypes productively. So again, you can do several things at the same time. So if you have a bigger team, you can prototype different things. While the programmers are prototyping game mechanics, the artists could be prototyping art. So they could create different art styles, show them to the target audience, create some world building, stuff like that, and test it out. And that goes to type 6, which is it doesn't have to be digital. And this is one thing that's very near and dear for me. It doesn't have to be digital. Almost every game can be made as a paper prototype. It can be made into a board game, and it can be tested. Not every aspect can be tested as a paper prototype, but so many can. So many aspects of it can. And actually, I think it's one of the best ways to, for example, when people ask, like, how do I balance something? It's black juju magic. Of course, you need to still go into Excel and do math and stuff like that. But one of the best testing methods is best balancing methods is testing. So again, making a paper prototype. So here he explains, for example, how to make Tetris as a paper prototype, how to make Halo as a paper prototype in the book. Even if it's real time, you can still make it. If you don't know how, just invent. Like, I'm very sure that now you're like, well, this game can't, because you're trying to poke holes at it. But instead, what if I turn it around and say, like, what if your challenge is now to make Halo as a paper pro? How would you do that? So you think, okay, real time, it's a risk, How can I test something because this is real time, and paper board games are usually more turn-based. Excuse me. Now, for example, he says his example is like, okay, well, we can make it super fast turn-based. So let's put a metronome there. Every time the metronome ticks, you get to do one action, and then it's almost real time. And then you have several players. Everybody's steering their own players on the board, and you're already trying out different mechanics. But definitely there's things that can't be tested with prototypes, paper prototypes. But the thing is that, for example, especially balancing is super easy to do. Testing out if something is too powerful or not, especially if it is even close to a card game or any other game that is board games. So it doesn't have to be interactive again. All your prototypes need not be digital. They don't need to be interactive. Simple sketch animations can go a long way to answering questions about the gameplay. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, with its novel jumping and time reversal mechanics, was originally prototyped purely with non-interactive animations of incredible acrobatics the designers imagined, so the team could more easily look at it, think about, and discuss how to create interactive systems that would achieve this vision. This goes back to a very important subject, which is game design document. When you make your game design document, don't write a novel in there. First off, you're probably not a novelist, and even if it was a novelist, writing game design document as a novel, it's probably not the most intuitive way of explaining something. So again, writing long text, if you're a professional game designer, is just, people are not going to read it. It might help you with your thought process, then it's fine, just write it for yourself. How you do it is make images, make animations. That explains for a programmer, an artist, much more what you want. Because that is the idea of the game design document, is to gather all the things, the core things, in a way that you can communicate with the rest of the team. It's not, if it becomes the Bible with every small thing, every small detail, is most probably gonna not communicate the right way, and you're just anyway gonna sit there fixing it all the time. So save the details to the devil, which is you, the designer. So once it goes into detail level, you need to sit down with your programmers, your designers, your artists, and talk with them. Can you make Can you make two, one for yourself and one for others? Yeah, of course. Yes. Why not? Just don't spend too much time on it. If you're it depends on how much time you have. I mean, if you don't have time to make two, make the one that's for the team, not for yourself. Like, try to make the minimum for yourself then. It depends again how much time you have, because you can still write down things, don't get me wrong, but really writing it in detail in proper prose is going to take you a lot of time. One is already painful enough. Exactly. For example, for the Witch game I'm working on, I created a game design document partially to communicate with you guys, but also because it helps me go through and collect my thoughts. That's fine. And then if you work in a team, I think game design document is more to communicate with the team. The thing is, it's like you might write the best explanations, have perfect animations, you make a tutorial step by step. What does Björn want today? No, I was kidding. It's not about wanting, but what should it be, But anyway, the programmer is going to come to your desk and be like, with his cup of coffee, be like, I looked at the jumping mechanic and could we go through that? So you might as well just realize that, okay. And then what you can do is, the GDD might be actually the whiteboard for you. You can actually use a whiteboard. That's a really good way to explain things because both can paint. But you can also then open the GDD, be like, okay, let's look. Okay, here you can see this animation. See that thing? Make that. Do you mean like they did it in Super Mario? Yeah, a bit similar, but could we have it a bit more like higher jumps? I don't know, whatever, wider jumps. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something. And then, okay, and then he goes back. And then after, 2 hours, he's like, oh, I have an example. Like I made a prototype of it, and then you go back and look at it and you evaluate it, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. So trying to be too, there's no way a piece of paper or anything can substitute a designer or face-to-face discussion. But if you have a piece of paper, please make it visual, make it pictures, make it animations, and then just add words where it helps. Like you can still add words. Don't take it to extremes. What is the next thing? So again, I think it goes really strongly into the tip 7, which was it doesn't have to be interactive. And again, that is a way to communicate with your team, but also your team to communicate with you. Pick a fast loop game engine. Yeah. So when you pick your game engine, it doesn't need to be, you can even have a game engine. So what he says here even, and I think this is a really good example, is that you could have Game Maker, you could have Construct 3, you could have, Paper and Glue, whatever your game engine is here, which is only for prototyping. And then here you have your custom built assembly code engine, You could even have where some parts of the engine, of course, you can still use outside libraries, so you can make just the heavy lifting fast, but that's a totally different issue. But here, you could have a fast prototyping engine, which is a bit like using a whiteboard, right? Why not have, if you have the resource and the ability to, like, for example, what I've used with Arash is that he knows Game Maker a bit, so he's made prototyping Game Maker to explain to me, and we've evaluated ideas before I start coding in a real engine, right? So again, this is of course a decision of the team or the company that you work in, but remember, to test something, you don't have to instantly go and write your own custom engine. You can test it in one thing and then build it in another. Then again, if your prototype engine is good enough to actually deliver the full game, you might consider also releasing on it, because it's still going to have more oomph. But if it isn't, then you can use this tip. So again, prototypes doesn't need to be the full game. They can be just one specific thing. It should be. And then prototype number 9, which he goes into very deep, and it even has its own lens. And it's called Build the Toy First. So earlier we discussed, I think shortly, kind of what's the difference between toys and games. Where toys are fun to play with their own sake, and conscious games have goals and much more rich experience, is what he says here. So the idea of, then there is the lens of toy. So to use this lens, stop thinking about whether your game is fun to play and start thinking about whether it is fun to play with. Ask yourself these questions. If my game has no goal, would it be fun at all? If not, how can I change that? When people see my game, do they want to start interacting with it even before they know what to do? If not, how can I change that? There are two ways to use this lens of toy. One way is to use it as on an existing game to figure out how to add more toy-like qualities to it. That is, how to make it more approachable and more fun to manipulate. But manipulate, that's a hard another one. It's like midgetate. Anyway, but this second way, the braver way, is to use it to invent and create new toys before you even have an idea what the game will be played. Any idea what the games will be played with? What? This is the weirdest structure of a sentence again. It is to use invent, create new toys before you even have any idea what games will be played with them. Okay, this is risky if you are on a schedule, but if you're not, it can be a great divining rod to help you find wonderful games you might not have discovered otherwise. So the second one is kind of what I'm trying to do with my game. Why it's taking so long is because I'm still looking for that toy. And I really like this because once you find a toy, something that's just fun to play with, it's a bit like a fidget spinner. I like to use an example for all you young trendy kids. So once you find something that's just fun to play, like this could be a toy, I guess, if you know what this is. It's like this kind of so this is fun to play with, and it doesn't really have any benefit, I guess. I wonder if this has too much noise. So you just keep this rotating, right? It's a wrist power gyro. Anyway, so it's just a fun toy, right? And once you find that, it's gonna basically make your game so much stronger. It's kind of hard to explain. Have you guys had that experience? If you haven't, I'm surprised, but where your game. Like I found that, for example, in Minecraft, I didn't really have a goal, but it was just so fun to play around in that environment that I enjoyed it immensely. That's actually how they built GTA. They built this whole universe first, and then they were like, okay, what can you do here? And then they built a toy around it, and that's how they made the first GTA. Also, what other games? Lemmings was another example that they developed that way. So finding the toy, and I think this is for me as a game designer very important. If I can make just a toy, it's so much easier to make the rest. But that depends again what type of game you're making. But even in a strategy game, like in StarCraft 2 when I was playing it, it's so satisfying just moving units around and several units. It's the toy in itself. You can make them dance even. I feel about the Sims, to be honest. Yeah, Sims is a great, it's also a toy. I think most good games, they just feel polished. They just feel like they have this magic in them. I would argue they almost always have this toy-like quality where you can remove everything and it's just satisfying doing something. Like whatever your controller is. It's just satisfying to interact with things. And I think Blizzard also works very strongly around that. A bit more lately. Like even like the buttons in Blizzard games, they feel like, it's just, I could just sit there and click that button in the menu. To me, it's kind of a hook. It is, but it is the hook, and it becomes one of the hooks, for sure. But if you explain it as a hook, I think it is not as easy to grasp. So if you just think it as a hook, so hooks are, for example, what Ryan Clark uses in his article, and they're the things that, and usually this toy-like behavior is the thing that's novel about your game. So I think, but thinking as a toy, like I'm trying to create interesting interaction. And then you're like, interesting interaction sounds very academic. And then you're like, well, remember when you had a car, one of the toy cars, and as a kid you just loved playing around and looking at it go around. You still have those experiences as an adult, especially in games, where you're just like, you might even, like, even when I play test your guys' games, sometimes I just sit there and play around with something. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. It's kind of just, I'm like a cat following the, thread. Looser term than what actually hook is, but it does hook you in the toy aspect. Yeah, exactly. It definitely, if you have that, is really strong hook. Then build your whole game around that. Build your whole game. Like GTA is just fun around just smashing things, stealing cars, throwing people around. It's just fun. You don't have to have even like and then police comes, you're chasing. I actually, in original GTA 1 and 2, I just enjoyed creating havoc. I didn't really play them. I don't think I ever finished the game, like the storyline in GTA 1 and 2. I don't even know if they had one because it was so much fun wrecking, hell and running around farting and stuff like that. So, sounds weird now. We lost the female audience there, but anyway, so again, that's very 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 strong if you can find that. But it's not easy either. But it's probably the best way to find that novel thing. Have you heard of Raft? The hook of the game was literally a hook. I haven't heard of it. I haven't played it. Sounds cool though, and that is, I need to play that game so I can say like, look at Raft, and there's the hook, is the hook. No, but then you can have other hooks. Like, I think Cuphead's hook is the art. The art is not, well, it's cartoony, but it's not a toy, right? You're not gonna just stare at the art in it. Like, you will stare at the art. It's so beautiful, but it's an art piece, the whole game. But that's the whole thing. That's the hook, right? That's not a toy. So hook can be anything. And it's the thing that hooks you in, that makes you like, oh, I love this so much. How far are you into the book? So right now we're at chapter 8. So we're going through chapter 8, and we'll soon hopefully get to chapter 9. This is very, very academic, the whole chapter. I maybe have gone through it very bit too accurately, but I think it had. I'm going to skip next. Next is like he explains the loop and how they loop through different games. There's like 4 or 5 games. And he has how much is enough. And we'll actually discuss that next. But we're at chapter 8. It shouldn't take you more than like 3-4 hours to read up and catch us up if you have the book. If you don't, you can join our Discord. And, there's a whole channel which has all the lenses. Or alternative, there's VODs of our 3 other episodes. And you can watch them. So there's 3 different episodes. The first one went through the lens of experience, the lens of emotion, and then so on and so forth. So that should actually take you, well, it's actually probably faster to read it because we discuss a lot. But you will also get, of course, additional insight from me and Tastygraph if you watch the VODs. Now, so the next kind of chapter, or next part of the chapter, not next chapter yet, but goes into how much is enough. When do you know you're, looped enough? And, the work is never finished, So it basically even says it here. Like, you can work yourself to death. You have to just set, when is it good enough for yourself, which is probably good. Like, for me personally, how I think about it is like, how long do I want to work on the game? Because I don't want to be stuck. When it's my personal part, I don't want to be stuck with the same game for more than 2 years. So that means I have to get certain results during certain parts of like, halfway through, quarter through, and so forth. And that's where he comes back to, and he talks this more from bigger companies, but applies for small companies, maybe not single devs, is that over the years, I developed my rules of thumb for getting games done on time and under budget, which I call the 50% rule. The 50% rule, the first. When planning your game, make sure that you build it in such a way that if 50% of your budget were removed, you could still have shippable game. This rule will force you to keep your system simple, and will help guarantee that even when things go wrong, they will go wrong. You have to cut features. You still have guaranteed a shippable game. So from again, how it worked for me as an indie developer is that I say 2 years. After 1 year, I should already have a shippable game. So I should plan it so that after 1 year, if I'm ready to work on it 2 years, because again, my time is the budget right now. Of course, I'm gonna still spend on other people's, helping me build it, but it's the biggest investment is that. And then the second 50% rule, the 50 rule, the second, all core gameplay modes should be fully playable at the halfway mark in your schedule. If this is rule, it means you'll spend about half the time getting your game working and half the time making it great. All too often, developers plan to spend 80% of the time getting it working and 20% of the time making it great. And of course, things go wrong, and that 20% gets eaten up, and in the end, you have a game that is late and weak. And this is something where you get so much hate from other like your players. So again, I think this 50-50 rule is good because you will anyway not hit that 50% mark. You should really try, like really try. But in the end, there's gonna anyway be a situation where maybe it takes 1 year and 2 months instead of 1 year to make it. If 2 years is the whole thing, and then you will have more than ample time to sit there and polish it until it's really great. It's a very simple game. It's very prototypey, but when I saw its hook, I was in love with the mechanic. The game itself was very limited since the last time I played it, but the use of the hook in the game can be so much fun. So much. Used in so much more. Oh, well, again, still like an artist. But yeah, I mean, definitely work on those different. Oh, KDO with the resub, sup, dude?
92 what?
KDO 92 what? I like that. That's his emote. Welcome, dude. I appreciate the support. Thank you for the resub, and welcome to the Game Design Book Club. How long have we? 1.5 hours. Yeah, we're about. Seem like these are about 2 hours episodes. So then we come to your secret fuel, the last thing in this chapter. Oh my god, this chapter, my god, it was the most theoretical thus far. And luckily, I knew most of these theories from before, like from agile development to all these kind of things. But I'm very sure if you guys are new to this, it's gonna be rough reading. So I hope I covered it well enough. So the last thing, the lens of passion. At the end of each prototype, when you're carefully mitigating risks and planning what to do next, don't forget to check how you feel about your game with these important questions. Am I filled with blind passion about how great this game will be? If I've lost the passion, can I find it again? If the passion isn't coming back, should I be doing something else? At the end of every sprint, when you are studying your prototypes and planning what to do next, you must remember to also do a passion check. Passion is the way your subconscious tells you that it is excited about your game. If the passion has gone away, something has gone wrong. If you can't figure out what it is, it's very likely your game will be dead on arrival. Passion has its dangers. It is an irrational emotion after all, but you must take it seriously. For more often than not, passion is what knocks down obstacles and carries the game to success. So I agree with him, and I'm very specific how he says it. For me, I think it's hard, especially if you have a 2-year project. It's hard to be everyday passionate, and I think that's what people a lot of time confuse it with it. You can't be everyday passionate. When the day comes and you have to, you have to do language. Internationalization system, where you can support, all the 5 languages you wanted, because you need those markets to get enough sales. You're not going to be the most passionate about that. You're going to be like, I'm going to code this in 2 days and better sure help make it well so I don't have to go back to it. Now, that's the thing, that maybe then you're not passionate, but you're still passionate about the game. I'm not mean that. But at 2 weeks intervals, when you get finished, when you get that, now I'm done with this 2-week sprint. Now I've done the things I've done. If you're not passionate at that point, when you're actually reached greatness or like in that small aspect, you're in trouble. Then you should definitely look into what are you doing. So again, it's looking at it from not constant passion, but the passion should always be there and should always be in the background. But it's not going to always be there because you will have to do things you don't like that much, which is not part of the whole flow. And that's where you need discipline. So you wake up at 9 in the morning or whatever, you come back home from work at 6 in the evening and you start working. And you work for whatever. You set a goal that you will work every day 2 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours if you're indie, and you work those. It doesn't matter if you're passionate. Now, at the end of 2 weeks, when you reached your goals, that's when you're like, hey, I reached this, I play tested it, I saw these people have fun with the game, or I didn't. And I think now I know where I need to go. And that's when you need to feel the passion. You need to feel, otherwise you will not have enough strength to pull it through. I plan to steal like an artist with it at some point, or at least release Can See a viable, versatile option. Yeah, that's the thing. When you play games, you catalog all these ideas, and it's really useful to have. And that's why it's super important to take notes. Please, guys, write down your ideas. I don't care how young you are and how well your memory works. I don't think my memory is any worse from when I was 12, but if I don't, anybody who doesn't write it down will forget it. You will remember a vague thing, but the thing is, when you read it, it will bring it back much more powerful, and you will remember the essence of it. It's so important, and you don't have to spend a lot of time. You can just jot down whatever comes out, like one line. It's enough. Hey, Ceres TT, welcome to the Company Game Desk, and cheers for the follow. It's also good to test play as a player, because it's if you test play as a creator, you might not be as critical for things you need to be fixed. It's also good to test play as a player, because if you test as the creator, yeah. So remember, and you need to test with other people than yourself. It's just a fact. For example, in the current project I'm working on my own time, I regret that I haven't tested it enough with other people. Something I need to do more. And it doesn't need to be the huge, alpha test. Like, I plan to have for that game a huge alpha test with like 100 people playing it, and hopefully some of them giving me feedback. Now, or hundreds of people, hopefully. But, that said, you should have your kind of set people, like 3-4 people that are in the target audience, and you trust their opinion, and you have to, then you should do every other week testing. I just haven't had the opportunity. My set group has not been present they've been busy, so. But I should find another way to do it. I don't write down my ideas. I make project plans, stop working on it, and I remake it. Well, that's fine. It's still a way of documenting. It's still done. But I think most of our ideas sometimes are not that big, Jesse. And then you only have your big ideas. It's the small ideas sometimes that are super valuable. And I think that, when you look at people who are super good at expressing themselves and talking, like Rami, I'm very sure he's come to a lot of conclusion after writing down things. So writing down your thoughts, and then when you look at it in retrospect, you're going to get additional insight, which you didn't have at the moment. And if you don't write it down, you will never have the opportunity to do that. You could go back and try to be like, the 22nd of June, I sat in front of a fire and I thought these 5 thoughts. Yeah, you will still remember, like, oh, I once had an idea for a Tetris game, but you were a first-player shooter and you needed to dodge the bullets and the blocks falling from the sky and blah, blah, blah. And they were like houses. They were actually aliens, and you don't remember that idea. But then you won't remember that one hook idea that you had, or some small thing. And that's the thing is, sometimes those smallest ideas are the most valuable ones, in my experience. Sup, Clayman? Sup, Super Jesse, by the way? Sup, Chibi Party? Sup, KDO? Sup, all? Everybody's welcome? So again, the passion thing, I agree how he wrote it here, but I think I still have a slight different interpretation or opinion about the lens of passion. Again, I do think it needs to be present at regular intervals, which probably are like every other week you should feel passionate. But if you expect to be passionate every day and everything that goes into making a game, you're likely to be disappointed. Again, if you work in a bigger company and you only have one thing to worry about, you should be passionate 24/7 because you're getting to do whatever you love to do. But when you're making your own game or a smaller company, you will also have to clean the toilets, and I'm very sure you won't be passionate about that. And clean the toilets is a metaphor for whatever you need to do in your game. I just randomly noticed that you might have some guitar. Same guitar as me. Is that a Yamaha? No, it's not a Yamaha. It's a Simon and Patrick. But I'm planning to buy a Yamaha. I really like their APX series, which is a bit thinner. That's a full acoustic. I want to get an electro acoustic so I can plug it in. But yeah, I personally like the Yamaha APX I like, but some of the Yamahas I don't like their sound. It's a bit too sharp. But yeah, that's actually quite a small guitar. It's like one of those artists, like it's smaller body than most. Okay. I think that was that chapter. So that was a whole chapter. That felt like 3 from previous chapters. So I hope you got something out of it. We still have 1 chapter to go. And we already discussed some of the points from it. And it's also very listy. So many lists. So maybe I'll just cover the lenses. I'm trying to keep it short. We have about half an hour to cover this. So, okay, so the next chapter is called "The Game is Made for a Player." So again, it's made for a player. That's the whole idea of making a game. It's made for somebody. It's made for your audience. So this talks about audience. It's one of my favorite topics. That's why I'm trying to limit how much I talk about it. So again, I really like how he starts off the chapter. I really like how he always starts off the chapter. I'm going to read it out. At one point in Einstein's violin. At one point in his career, Albert Einstein was asked by a small local organization to be the guest of honor at a luncheon and to give a lecture about his research. He agreed to do so. The luncheon was quite pleasant, and when the time came, the host anxiously announced that Albert Einstein, the famous scientist, was there to talk about the theories of special and general relativity. Einstein took the stage, and looking out at a largely non-academic audience consisting of mostly old ladies, he explained to them that he certainly could talk about his work, but it was a bit dull, and he was thinking perhaps instead the audience would prefer to hear him play the violin. The host audience both agreed that it sounded like a fine idea. Einstein proceeded to play several pieces he knew well, creating a delightful experience the entire audience was able to enjoy, and surely one they remembered for the rest of their lives. Einstein was able to create such a memorable experience because he knew his audience. As much as he loved thinking and talking about physics, he knew that it wasn't something that his audience would be really interested in. Sure, they asked him to talk about physics because they thought it would be the best way to get to what they really wanted, an intimate encounter with the famous Albert Einstein. So again, I think that's a very good example of know your audience. You're making it's for them. I mean, you will enjoy talking about, for example, I enjoy here talking about all kinds of finer points of game design. And I also try to see, like, I know that a lot of you are game design, and I'm even now catering it towards you as indie developers. So I'm reading this and I'm also trying to think from a point of indie and from a professional. I know that not all of you guys are professionals. KDO, I think you work in the industry, but so the examples that are more related to indie devs and how it relates to indie devs is more interesting, for example. So just an example how in the Game Design Book Club are trying to take in mind my audience. And that's something you need to do when you make your game. So we discussed here earlier, 8 filters, which if you missed was artistic impulse, does this game feel right? Demographics, will the intended audience like this game enough? Experience design, is this a well-designed game? Innovation, is this game novel enough? Business and marketing, will this game be profitable? Engineering, is this technically possible to build this game? And social community, does this game meet our social and community goals? And lastly, the 8th filter, playtesting, do the playtester enjoy the game enough? So in these filters, I'm just reiterating for people who join. In the demographics thing is, this chapter is basically about demographics and talk about how to find your demographic or how to please them and what kind of demographics there are. So when you work in a company, usually the higher ups already have a demographic in mind. So they will come to you, the game designer, and they will be like, I want to make a game for young girls. And then you have to make a game for young girls. Or they will be, I want something for 50 plus women. And you're making a game for 50 plus women. I'm not a 50 plus woman nor a young girl. Even if I'm often confused with a young girl. So, and that said, how do you define that for an indie? So I'm going to reiterate. One way of defining your demographics is to find an underserved market. So you need to be both the higher up. So that's what the higher ups are trying to do. They're trying to find a market that is viable for them. You might not be Disney who has a predefined market. So you need to go and be like, I used to play a lot of RTS. There's no RTS games anymore. Why? And if I made an RTS game now, are people going to enjoy it? Because there's a lot of people who are like missing RTS games, for example. This is very, very. There's like, that's what Tooth and Tail did, for example. Because now the RTS market is kind of gone towards MOBA for a while. Now, so demographics. So if you look, he goes through several lists. So he, for example, explains the different interactions. So, for example, I'm not going to read all of this, but here you can see there's a lot of lists. The first is 0 to 3 infant toddler. Children in this age bracket are interested in toys. Then he has the 4 to 6-year-old preschooler, this age where children generally show their first interest in games. 7 to 9-year-old kids. Then you have 10 to 13-year-old kid, which is the preteen, the tween market. It's only recently the marketers have started to recognize this group as distinct from both kids and teens. Children this age are going through a period of tremendous neurological growth and are suddenly able to think about things more deeply and blah, blah, blah. And then you have teens. The job of the teenager is to start getting ready for adulthood. That's 13 to 18. And then you have the 18 to 24 audience, the 25 to 35, the 35 to 50, and then the 50 plus, if I'm not incorrect. So I can't go in through the finer points. That's going to take forever. But the idea is that, and I think people who not worked around defining a target audience, this is the hard part, because once you go to the age, it's hard to define, especially an indie game. Like my Witch game, what age audience is that for? It's probably for young adult and 20s and 30s. Like it's not for an audience 50 plus. 50 plus, usually there are people whose kids are just moved out of their home, they have more time, they might actually, they want to play usually more social games like golf, tennis, and stuff like that. Meet up with old friends, play Facebook games, simple casual games. So these are the things they like. Hey, M Jack, welcome to the company Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. So that's an example of plus 50. So again, if you're young, you're not gonna. It's hard to think what is the life of a 50-year-old man. I mean, but imagine, you probably had your kids, most people have their kids around their 25 to 35. And then at 50, those kids are going to be adults, just like you are soon going to be an adult or already are an adult. And you're going to move out of home. And suddenly, there's going to be much more time to do other things. So, when thinking of 50 plus, you need to think about a man who used to be a family man. Now he's still a family, but his family, like his kids have moved out. And now he can go back to being a rock and roll superstar or, game player again. He had to be a dad for quite a long and take care of his kids. So again, then it's like, okay, what type of games are they going to play? What kind of desires do they have? And this book, definitely if you don't have any insight into these target audiences, it does give you a glimpse into that world. And if you don't know anything about this, then you basically have to be an anthropologist. Basically go and study them. So go meet a lot of 50 plus, go talk to them. Now, most people don't aim for that audience. A lot of the time people aim for the same age as they themselves, but that's not always a luxury you can have. Or sometimes you're just weird and you like games that, are a different crowd. So knowing what age your game is actually about. And usually it's easy. Like I said, I haven't thought about it very deeply, but I know that 20s to 30s and young adult, it's not for people who have just gotten their kids and they're going to be full up driving them to soccer practice or American football practice or some other practice, or they won't just have time to play these type of games, except a few exceptions. Young kids, it's going to be too complex, it's going to be too deep. I know that they won't be able to play them, except again, exceptions. And 50 plus, might like them if you were a geek back when you were young, but if you're not, you're not again. So I know this is the age range that fits my game. Again, and then he goes into what's the difference between male and female, players. So if you define very strongly to male or to female, they have different kind of way of thinking, different kind of gameplay they like. Again, in the way he has gone through, where, for example, for men, he says they like mastery, competition, destruction, spatial puzzles, trial and error. And then he says 5 things females tend to like in games is emotion, real world, nurturing, dialogue, and verbal puzzles, learning by example. And though he has some good points in this, I think that it's kind of oversimplifying, and I do know that he probably knows this himself, but like, these are general rules, yes, but again, your target audience, even if it's women, it might be women who are into gaming. Like, I know a lot of people who love Zelda, but that game is about, fighting and all kinds of things. It's not about necessarily nurturing or anything like that. It does have dialogue and verbal puzzles and motion, but it doesn't really tie into the real world. So I don't know how useful it is to even read about that. I think the age classes is more because, again, the age, again, define. If you're under 7, you haven't gone to school yet. Once you're 7, you go to school. Once you're a teenager, you're starting high school, your life changes. Once you move out of home, your life changes. So it's actually surprising. Actually, one thing I want to pick out here is that when he talks about target platform in an earlier chapter, which he calls the chapter of the venue, so he says, like here, he says that the shifting sands of platforms. A tremendous amount of discussion takes place in digital game realm about platforms. Players and designers are constantly debating about PC versus console versus mobile versus tablet versus web versus handheld versus arcade versus etc, etc, etc. Which is the best, the most powerful, the most fun, the most likely to still be here in 3 years? It is a human nature to assume that when something is successful, it will remain that way forever. But it isn't the case. Some things stay and some things go. And then he starts talking about the venue. So it's more important to think about the venue. Are you at the home couch in front of your TV? Are you at your private work office playing? Are you at, a playground? Are you in the museum? Are you in a public space going to work? So even if there's no mobile, there's no touch interface on mobiles in the future, no mobile phones, then, there's still going to be people who want to play games while they go to work or have a 5-minute break from work. So I'm surprised when he goes to age, is that he defines it by age group, which is the, again, industry standard, but he doesn't talk about, like, actually these are about, well, in the beginning, it's a bit about how you develop as a human. There's certain things you can't necessarily do as younger than 7 because you're still in developing age. But after that, it's about your circumstances. Society says that once you're 20 to 25, around that time, you move out of home. Because you move out of home, you're gonna start to earn money. And you're probably not studying anymore, maybe. Or maybe you are still studying. And that's also going to depend on how much money you have. So all these situations. So basically, I would say these ages, what situation are you? Are you a family man? Are you home with are you living still with your parents? And stuff like that. And that would actually be more valuable, because thinking that way, it brings it closer. Because that's what you need to think about. Of course, what type of thing they might like. But also, what is their life situation? Do they have time to sit 5 hours every evening playing a very story-driven game? Because they have young kids that are just born. What he's saying is loosely correct from the modern times guidelines. Society is changing as well. Yeah, society is changing. It's always the people who are now 30 had a different childhood than people who were 30 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So, people who are 40 experienced our age and played games. Whereas when I was young, when I was 18 and I was in chat forums, it was very strange if someone over 30 played games at all. It was like, what? Because, again, games weren't as widely received as back then yet. So about 12, 15 years ago. 15 years ago. So, definitely aesthetics, but I do think also in main command, and there's a difference. So then when you get to the gender, which we were talking about, is that the only way I find how to work through this is through testing. I mean, I will try to make it more emotional or more nurturing if it's for girls, but also I think that that's kind of a too wide of assumption. I've seen so many games intended for girls which are totally like wrong. And what girls are today, or women, depending on what age, what they like, so much depends. So I think defining between male and female are not enough anymore. It's basically at the point where I don't know even if it's useful. It is useful. You should still say what your main audience, but it's fine to also go to gender neutral. I want to make a game that has a cross between Golden Sun, Kingdom of Hearts, Rune Factor, Pokemon. I'm not sure what age group that would be. Well, you need to define. And again, a really good tip that he had from here before in the earlier chapter was that if you don't just copy from other games, you need to, if you want that novelness, you need to bring super sexy view. Thank you, Ryu. Yeah, this is the full screen, full beer. We're having the game design book club. I don't know if you've joined before, and I have now the whole screen for myself. I didn't put I didn't put it fully full screen. I didn't do that. But I made it quite big because Tasty's sick today and couldn't be with us, and we're talking about the difference between male and female players. You might have some good insight. I feel that your game probably would also succeed well with female players. Good Ryu. Yeah, I just started a game design course at high school and have my first son. What are the key requirements of pre-production? And that's actually interesting. He talks about the definition. In the previous chapter, he talked about pre-production and post-production, or production, pre-production, production, and he kind of, those kind of things are kind of old school already. It's kind of from the waterfall method and those kind of where you plan a lot. Like you still have pre-production and then production, but iterative game design is definitely what you should be doing instead of pre-production. But don't challenge your teacher. It doesn't usually end well. Don't question him. He knows everything. They say when players like farming games. Yeah, farming games definitely something. It's basically when he had here, he says nurturing, emotion, real world. Farming game ties into real world. It ties into nurturing, growing plants and stuff like that. Yeah, I find it quite shite. No, it's okay. You still learn stuff, so don't. It's okay. But definitely, like the Angular manifesto is something. That's the kind of hard job of a teacher, is that usually they're not in the industry anymore, so they don't work anymore as a professional programmer or something like that. And if you don't work for 5 years, you're out of the loop because this industry changes so very, 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 very fast. I feel like female prefer more casual games, and that's the thing. That's the thing why I don't like about this male and female here. It's so easy to be sexist. Like he says here, males like mastery, competition, destruction, spatial plus trial and error, and then female like more emotional, real world, nurturing dialogue. I still think you should know that are you more going to target males or females, but it's kind of, I would rather test than assume anything. And I think that too many like assume like, oh, girls like pink. And then it becomes very, very bad, and it's just an awful game. Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley are key games to say it's not just women that like farming. Yeah, exactly. It's not just women. A lot of men like Farmville was by women, a lot of men. But the thing is, when thinking about the demographics, you can't be too sensitive. You need to be able to say that, male players don't like this type of game. Once you tested it, you're like, it's not testing well with male players, because if you don't, you're gonna waste so much time. It's not about being insensitive or rude or sexist. It's about being, realistic and productive. Would I would link what I wrote already? You can. I probably won't read it right now, but I can read it once we finish this chapter later on. Will be link. Yeah, I mean the thing is, that's the thing. Like I find that, for me personally, this is my personal experience. I do think, like, for example, for the Witch game, I'm deliberately making it gender neutral. So I'm not going for a very strong male or female audience, and that's kind of what feels right for me for that game. Doesn't mean that in future I might not have a crazy amount of blood and, stuff like that. Hey, Lehusid, welcome to the Company Game Devs. Cheers for the follow. So, again, that's the whole thing. Like, for me, the male-female necessarily hasn't been... Again, there's a lot of females that love destruction. Some of them are very destructive. It's scary. But, yeah, so for me, he discussed it in depth, but I kind of tuned out when reading almost, because it's like... It's more like, this is the thing, like, this feels like demographics is something you need to define, no matter if you're indie or if you're like, AAA, super business company, whatever you're working for. The thing is, and then when you're working at a AAA, they might say, we are looking for a male audience, and you might have to be able to put them into this terminology that, for example, this book has here. Or a female audience, and put in those terms. The thing is, when in indie, I personally don't find too much help in that. There's still a difference, but how I deal with it is I just say, I think this game, my intuition tells me that I want to have male players play this more, or this is intended more for males, and then I will just test it with male players, and then if females play it again, it's fine. Again, demographics is not about excluding people. It's about definitely including one group, and then hope that other groups also join. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's Kotaku. Yeah, Kotaku is totally illegitimate. They don't know what they're talking about. No, just kidding. They're awesome. It's one of the best. But you should always check up your sources. Yeah, like women play Destiny 2. Women play RPGs. Women play a lot of things. So, it's more... And then, is it going to give you insight? Again, I think the situation of a person defines more. And their history and culture. So... And with culture, I don't mean necessarily are you American or Asian necessarily, that too, but also what type of games did you experience when you were young, and your situation. What I mean with that is it's more important to think about I'm gonna make a game for console players. Console players are usually in this situation in life. If you just have a newborn baby, you definitely probably don't have time to play PC games at all if you have a newborn family. Except if there are exceptions. It's not about the exceptions, it's about the general rule. Most who have a newborn or a couple of kids won't play. Once the kids get a bit older, they might play with them. And then again, that's another situation you can target. Let's target parents playing with their kids. Or then when the kids go home, they won't want to play with the parents anymore. And then that's another situation, Or then when the kids move out, that's another situation to target. So just like he says here with the platforms, don't target platforms necessarily, think about them, think about the venues. I would also say think about the life situation of people you can still say ages as the outcome of your thinking, but think about the situations, the lens of the situation. Maybe that's a new thing that I just invented. That comes us to lens 19, which he defines followingly. The lens of the player, lens 19. To use this lens, stop thinking about your game and start thinking about your player. Ask yourself this question about the people who will play your game. In general, what do they like? What don't they like? Why? What do they expect to see in a game? If I were in their place, what would I want to see in a game? What would they like or dislike about my game in particular? A good game designer should always be thinking of the player and should be an advocate for the player. Skilled designers hold the lens of player and lens 10 holographic design in the same hand, thinking about the player, the experience of the game, and the mechanics of the game all at the same time. Thinking about the player is useful, but even more if it's watching them play your game. The more you observe them playing, the more easily you'll be able to predict what they're going to enjoy. So testing, dude, it's testing. It's like I keep repeating this, and I even don't do it enough myself. It's like something I beat up myself every morning. It's testing. You can never do too much. And like said before in a previous chapter, you can easily test. You can even you can even use another game engine to test. You can just test one concept, and you should only test one concept, not just the whole game. Test a concept, see how your target audience reacts. You can make a mini prototype to just check and have like a research question. You can think it as science. You have a research question. I want to know if this toy-like mechanic I have is fun even without goals. Like, is it just fun clicking this? I'll make a prototype where you're just clicking a button and balls are flying around. Oh, it is fun. Oh, it's not fun. Why? What can I do to make it fun? And then if it's not fun, maybe I remove it from the game. So kill your darlings, guys. People don't play things they don't like unless you're suggesting women playing are doing it for money. Play games because they like them. Exactly. Another sellers figure there's no proof of what they like. Play, as it says in article, the information isn't actually conclusive. Yeah, but you need to take, that's the thing, like, we don't have to sit here. As game designers, you're not scientists, luckily. So we can draw conclusions that are just beneficial for us at that moment. And that's what we need to anyway. Like, we can't test every player that's ever going to play the game, but we can just a generalization of most people who are going to play it, and that's what we need to do. And if there's an article that's not conclusive, it can still give us insight, but then we test it in another prototype. So again, it comes back to, like, you should always be testing. There's no rules that say this is hard fact when it comes to design. It's very artistic. It's still partially scientific, but it's artistic and science melded together in a way that, you just have to test it in the end. Sup, Thom Eyes? Welcome. You get the full screen view today. So, the lens of the player is something, I think these questions are kind of, it doesn't even sum up well enough. It's kind of like, in general, what do they like? It's good. It's really good. But it's, for me at least, it's more intuitive. It's something, I always put everything in the terms of the player. That's more for me, how I would phrase it. I put everything in the terms of the player, of the target audience I'm making for. So instead of thinking, will I like this? Which I also think, I always also turn it around to, will, the middle-aged, let's say the 30-year-old arcade fan, will he like this game? This is my target audience. Will he like it? Or will the, gamer girl who also likes heavy music, which I've defined as my target audience, just as an example, will she like it? Will she be like, oh, this is interesting? Or will she be like, and think through that? You will still be wrong. You will still be wrong, probably most of the time. But thinking that way takes the player in consideration. And then what you do is you do the tests, because you will come to play. That's when, once you start turning around it like this, you will start notice, like, I don't know the answer. I have no clue if this kind of people will like the game, or will this person like this feature I made. And that's when you test. Or even earlier. Björn, do you think this book is good for someone who's just getting into game dev as a hobby? I would say the next book we're going to cover is better if you're just getting into game dev, and especially if you're not super, like if it's more a hobby. The Art of Game Design is it's a mix. From all the books, just shortly about the book. So this book is kind of a mix. It's good for hobbyists. It has a lot of key concepts, so you can become the next Rami Ismail or whatever. But it's also a bit theory heavy. Like you've been noticing when we go through it. It's a bit theory heavy. We're skipping a bit of the theory parts and trying to touch the finer points only. But it's a bit theory heavy. So meaning that before you have some experience, it might be a bit boring and kind of it's kind of out of context for you, because you're like, you don't know. Hey, Nathan Lockett, oi. Sup, mate? So I would say that the level up book you can find down below is better. I think that's better. It's more practical. It's gonna give you more practical advice to just get started. It's more like, this is what you do. This is more like artistic and scientific. It's like, think about the theme you have and how does it make you feel and doesn't make you cry at night. And go look at the demographics, go do these studies. So it's very scientific / art. I like it because I have a degree in game design, of course, so it kind of resonates with me, but I do know it's not for everybody. But it's a good midway. There's much more theoretical books. If you down below, there's one that's called Games Without Frontiers, which is a PhD level book, and that's gonna be like, I tune out. I'm like, at some point, it's still a great book with a lot of amazing information, but to able to kind of wrap your head around it, it requires a lot of mental. You need to be thinking. You need to have been thinking about these for years. If you want to argue semantics, that is fine, but you know what I meant by like people. Oh, okay, it's your internal discussion. But yeah, I'm saying that kind of. But yeah, so that's the lens of the player. And then he goes and he discusses Leblanc's taxonomy for game pleasures, psychographics, Barthel's taxonomy for player types, achievers, explorers, socializers, killers, more pleasure. And he talks about, like, there's basically different taxonomies, like, and taxonomies, like, how to explain taxonomies. Maybe you have guys maybe Ryu, I think, might have a good definition for it. But you know, and here he goes to again life situation and lifestyle is that, and he calls them psychographics, which is probably good, but I think lifestyle and life situation are better because age and gender is not the only thing. Like a baseball fan is another aspect of who somebody is, and then making a baseball game for that is great. And then you need to understand what is it to be a baseball fan, or what is it that baseball fan wants, or hardcore FPS player, or dog lover, all those things. Those are also good. And here he has like the taxonomy. So for example, they try to make lists of different types of players. So LeBlanc has the sensation, fantasy, narrative, challenge, fellowship, discovery, expression, submission. These are all kind of different things you can experience in game that certain people or certain target audience want. Or then Bartels has the achievers, the explorers, the socializers, the killers. So achievers being people who want to beat the game, get all the achievements and stuff like that. The explorers who want to just explore the game, they don't really care about finishing it. The socializers who want the social interaction. And then the killers are people who just want to beat other people. So, and this is more useful. It's just so much to go through on a stream format, but he has really good points. And then, for example, here's like he goes through three different taxonomies. So it's like, yeah, those things change per person per time, but that's not irrelevant when you. It's not as much relevant for you when you're defining the game because again, you're setting the goal. So the goal doesn't really move, except if your goal is initially wrong. Like there is no plus 50 hardcore FPS players, then, but maybe in the future there will be. So then there might be a market. So you're right in that aspect. But when you're defining your market and when you're in making a game, you probably already know that they should exist, and you should also think about how big that market is. So in that way, I mean, it's still a valid point. I mean, you're not wrong, but I mean, when you're defining a game, well, if you take 10 years to make your game, then it's relevant because then people will have moved on. And it's like, that doesn't exist anymore, dude. And that's actually maybe a good point for if you take and copy a game from the past, is think about, is this player, the people who like this type of game, do they exist anymore? It's something that I've been using Tooth and Tail because Ryan Clark used as a good example of this, but like the casual RTS, like they made a game that is not a MOBA, but it's still for RTS people. Like MOBAs are basically for RTS. It's casual though. It's not. You don't have to be like 200 APM to play a MOBA. Even then again, you almost need that already. but that doesn't have the aspect of managing large amount of troops. There hasn't been a lot of those recently that have been very, very successful, except maybe in the just the war genre there has been, but not in other. So then Tooth and Tail maybe filled that gap. I don't know, maybe to some point. So that's the thing to think about again when thinking of demographics. So all this taxonomy goes to the lens 20. So let's just jump there. It's easier to discuss it through that, which is the lens of pleasure. To use this lens, think about the kinds of pleasure your game does and does not provide. Ask yourself these questions. What pleasures does your game give to players? Can these be improved? What pleasures are missing from your experience? Why? Can they be added? Ultimately, the job of a game is to give pleasure. By going through the list of known pleasures and considering how well your game delivers each one, you may be inspired to make changes to your game that will increase your players' enjoyment. Always be on lookout, though, for unique unclassified pleasures not found in most games. For one of these might be what gives your game the unique quality it needs. So these taxonomies definitely help. So are you giving something for the achievers? So people want to achieve things. Do you have achievements? Do you have things you can achieve? Can you complete the game? Do you have people for explorers? Are there things to explore? Are there for the people who are socializers? The thing is, this lens is kind of like, can you? My advice usually is that don't try to do all of these, but do hit the key aspects that target audience wants. So if you're gonna make an FPS, most FPS games are these days are multiplayer and have a big social aspect to that. So making a single player FPS right now, well, then again, that's not for indies necessarily either, but well, Portal kind of was successful, but that's already a while ago. Has there been any successful single player only FPSs lately? I think most of them, if not all of them, have been, like, there's definitely been some, right? But have there been any that have been successful out of the ordinary that have kind of surfaced? Doom? How long? But it wasn't that a while ago already, Zeok. Sup, Jace? Welcome. Hello, hello. You're just catching us at the end. Sad. You missed all of this awesomeness. Yeah. It was a bit different because Tasty wasn't here, so it wasn't much discussion, more me explaining, but I hope you guys liked it still. Hopefully it was informative. There's going to be extra credits that talk about this. Yeah, extra credits, by the way, is a great resource. If you want to understand stuff deeply and very well, they give you the crash course. They're definitely a good way to start. And that's a really great resource if you're beginning to just go and look at extra credits videos. They have a great explanation of most parts of game design and game development in general. They might not go through very, very, very deep things. Like they won't how to pick a theme, what is a theme, why does the theme matter, and stuff like that. 1993. Well, there was a new Doom, right? That's what I meant. But I mean, there are FPSs that but that's the thing. Like Ryu was saying earlier, trends move. So if you were developing games 20 years ago, doing a single player FPS is amazing. Oh my god, you're flowing in cash. If you are in 2017 or 18, sir, then single player FPS maybe not the best choice. Well, there is the new Doom, right? So that's what I was thinking. But recently, there hasn't been that many. Quantum Break was kind of a single-player shooter, kind of. And didn't do terribly well. Didn't do terribly bad either. Like, I don't know. I'll link the video in Discord. Where should I put it? Put it in under game dev articles. Yeah, I think there's a one called game dev. Under share, there's game dev articles. So if you have good, by the way, guys, if you have great articles, or if you want to read great articles, join our Discord. Under our Discord, we have a lot of different things. You can't see it right now. But we have different channels for game dev articles and share your work. So you can share what you're working on, get feedback. You also have game dev articles where always when somebody finds something interesting, they can post the articles there and you get a list of interesting things to read. So if you're bored, you don't know where to go, Bjorn's not streaming, nobody's streaming, Ryu is not streaming. By the way, guys, go check out Ryu if you haven't. He's a excellent game dev. And I'm really excited seeing his game being released. When is it gonna be, Ryu? When? So go follow, drop him a follow if you haven't. But if you're bored and nobody's online, there's a lot of good videos of very knowledgeable people that people share. And also there's help channels for every part of game dev, from art, coding, design, to sound marketing and business. Novembia. No. Sup, Flippo? In fact, I spent 8 hours updating our tasks. Cool. You should... Are you following the advice? You should. There was a good advice about schedules, which was, what was it? Let's see here. The rule of 50%, that you should have. You should always have, at whatever you plan, at 50% mark, you should have a playable game no matter what, even if you're only 50% through. And then it leaves enough time for polish. And then the rule of seconds: all core gameplay missions should be fully playable at halfway mark on your schedule. Because again. Oh yeah, and then the other 50 rule was, when planning your game, make sure that you build it in a way that if 50% of your budget were removed, you could still have a shippable game. I think that's good. I'm not following their advice. No, most indies don't. They're like, I'm gonna make this until it's done, and here's my proposed schedule. Because usually you don't have like a huge team that, it's not like you're making your game costs 100,000 every month to develop. I want to study in Japan programming. I have a dream to cooperate on some game, but I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, you should, first off, just go to Japan. How old are you? Are you young? I mean, if go to an exchange program, do it. And even if it's not related to programming at all. Because most probably you'll just miss out and it's never going to happen. Because first off, you just need to learn their culture. There's so many weeboos that go to Japan and then they live there for 1 year and they hate it after that, because it's such a different thing to live there. It's not living in an anime. They have very different culture and you might be very lonely and have a hard time making friends. So go check it out first. But you can learn programming anywhere in the world, I would say. Some places a bit harder than others, maybe. I think Africa would be a bit challenging, but you can still go. A lot of time, if you want to be a programmer, it's more about your own drive. Just like if you want to make a game, it's more about your own passion and drive to make it. Education helps, knowing things helps, but your drive is the thing that's gonna pull it through. I'm confused. Why Japan and why programming? Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It would be cool. Like, I know some people, game devs who live in Japan, who are from here, and they're quite successful. So building actually a good network in Japan would be interesting. 17, yeah, go in an exchange program. Apply. Don't be scared. Do it. Do it. It's your only chance. Do it. South Korea is pretty cool. Yeah, South Korea, Taiwan. It depends on what you want. Just do it. If you feel like you want to go and visit some other country and introduce to their culture, do it. But do that first. Don't hinge your whole career as a programmer on it. Lucic, welcome to the company of Game Devs, and cheers for the follow. But definitely, trust me, it's very different from watching animes or watching IRL streams and stuff like that. So it's much more real. Most places in the world are quite similar. It's real, If you have, it's, but it might be just for you. Who knows? I wish I could hire a Korean army to code my graphics. Yeah, they are very talented in the graphics department. Maybe you can hire someday. Best graphics come from Korea, yeah. Man, it would be awesome to be a game dev in Japan, even if I've studied physics instead. Yeah. That's the cool thing. Once you're indie, like the guy who made Downwell, he lives in Japan. Once you're indie, you like where you can, pay your bills for a long time in the future. Like if you do a decent game, I mean, you can live wherever you want. The only cost you have is moving there. But you will also lose a lot of your networking and social contacts, something that you don't think about. But wherever you live your whole life, you have a lot of, contacts. Once you're alone in Japan, if you need to move a sofa, there's only the new friends. You can't call your dad or mom or your cousin or your uncle or your aunt or something, you know. And, or if you lose your keys, you might not have, you have to leave it with a friend or something. You can't just leave it at mom and dad's or something. Yeah. Well, you can do game dev wherever you want. But definitely make sure you have like a good solid plan for like your work, because I'm guessing you're, a Western person, so Western people still have a hard time finding jobs in Japan. But if you get there early enough, build contacts, it's definitely possible. They're very high performance in their work. They're like much more like this. They're like, you better deliver, reach your key performance indexes and stuff like that. Work in Japan, that sense, game dev was more of a thing I'd love to do there still. If I'd say I'd love to be a salaryman. I'd be, yeah, exactly. I would love to work for a year in any country. Like, I would like to work in US for a year, but as a game, like indie game dev, like working on my own games. Work in Japan for a year, move around a lot, but who knows? I don't think that's gonna happen. It's too expensive. But anyway, that's basically the chapters 8 and 9 in The Art of Game Design, A Book of Lenses by Jesse Schell. And next stream, so in a week, we're going to go through the experience is in the mind of players. And we're going to go through what that means. So the experience is in the mind of players. And chapter 11, the player's mind is driven by the player's motivations. Definitely the motivation part sounds very interesting. But again, and this is not going to be as theoretical, it's a bit lighter. Actually, it's like half the amount to read. So if you have the book, read up the next couple of chapters. Come and live on my couch, Björn. I need free internet and free Coca-Cola and snacks. I'll charge your lasting and good morning. Yeah. And then when I get old, I'll get thrown out. It's like, you're too old and ugly now. Get out of my couch. You live in Hawaii, right? That's like, I could go surfing every morning and die horribly because I don't know how to surf. that's so stereotypical. If someone says Hawaii, it's like surfing. Yeah. I can take part in military exercises too. I have military training, so how much is it knowing the right people and networking to get a job in Japan anyway, since you have the actual experience? Yeah, I would say, I don't know about Japan, but my guess is well, you're not getting anywhere here without networking. You're not getting anywhere in US networking. And I'm quite sure the same thing is in Japan. Networking is key to wherever you are. Because let's put it in another way. Instead of saying like you have to network to succeed, think that if you're alone, you're one person against the rest of the world. Once you network, you know other people. They can help you. You're not alone anymore. Even if they don't work for you or anything, if you make friends, you make acquaintances, you make contacts, you know people, that means that you're suddenly not alone. Like, I made a contact with Ryu, for example. Now he says I can come and live on his couch. So I have a place to stay at Hawaii now if I need to. If I was alone, I would not have that. If I would just show up at Hawaii and never talk to anybody, I would be like, I don't know where to stay. I guess I have to pay for a hotel. Now I'm already losing money instead of living on a comfortable couch. So yeah, if you don't speak that, you ain't going anywhere. And I know like 3 words in Japanese. Exactly. That's the hard part. Like, I don't know firsthand from Japan. I have several friends who were exchange students there. And they were quite lonely because people are quite withdrawn. and they kind of focus on work and study, and or then they're nitos and just focus on an online game. They're focused, let's say like this. But the same thing goes here in Finland, is that because you don't know the language, if the people don't speak that much English, like here we speak quite a lot of English, but still, if you're in a work environment, there's a lot of professions you can't get into if you don't speak Finnish. So because you couldn't be, you could be a cleaner because you don't need to speak, but you can't be in any kind of service field because you can't speak to the customers. So it limits a lot, especially the lower end jobs get very limited. So it's hard to then put your foot between the door. Game development is a bit easier because usually there's English, but Japanese, I know that they want, like, they're very quality, like, you need to have experience, so you anyway have to put your foot in the door wherever you live, and then have a good, strong portfolio to get the work there. There's not that many Western people get hired there, as I know. You can have my bed too. I never sleep in it anyway. I was on my computer. Bed, but I want to be deving, right? A couch is better because it can be a workstation and a bed. Plus, once in a week when you actually get tired enough to sleep, I don't want to have a weird surprise where you're sleeping next to me. Anybody doing a new game jam? It's 7 days long. I really would like to, just as a prototype, but I don't. The thing is, again, I'm very focused at this point. I'm very focused. I have so many things I need to get done. I can't do any new things. But that would definitely be one of the game jams I would like to do, because Unreal 4 is one I want to look into. I'm highly interested in seeing what that's, because now I looked into Unity, and that I work forever in, so I know that very well. GameMaker I've been now working in for a year just for fun, so I know that quite well. So now Unreal is kind of one of the there's many other big game engines like Godot and all those, but Unreal is one that's piqued my interest. Sup, Dinner David? We're just finished the Art of Game Design. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll be back next week with this, and now we will go into art mode. But before that, I have to take a slight break because I need to reset up everything, because I don't have my drawing tablet here. I don't have anything. I need to pull down this fake tapestry that is in my room. And no, I don't have to do that. But I do have to, and then I have to reset this cam to the ball cam. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. And we will continue with some drawing. So please, if you want to join in doing some post drawing, it would be interesting what Ryu could do. I've seen you do texturing, Ryu, but do you do 2D drawing? So usually we do post challenge, but today I was thinking we could maybe choose only 2 subjects and try to draw them with a higher quality than usually. Sexy drawings, that could be a great theme. Sexy drawings. I do 2D drawings. Yeah, that would be interesting to see. I think, yeah, that would be interesting to see. But if you don't have time, that's what I understand. So this is basically practice. I'm trying to upgrade my art skills. So every Sunday after the Game Design Book Club, we do a bit of drawing. I choose 2-3 references because that's what you need to do if you want to do something well, draw something well. Except if you're already an expert, then you might draw from your mind, just like horse. But let's draw your face cartoon style. I don't like to look at I don't want to stare at me for a whole stream, like 2 hours and look at that. Why is it so? But you can do that. You don't have to use the same reference or the same pictures as I do. But we will be back in 5 minutes. You can take a pause, go to the toilet, whatever you need, and we will be back. And if you're not here anymore, join us next Sunday for more The Art of Game Design. Check out the VODs if you haven't, and see you then.